B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Friday, March 23rd, 2018. I know many people who are screaming, "Stop the world! I want to get off." And in a dizzying display of chaos, irrational thinking, and a march toward war, Trump has had a wild week, and we are all reeling in reaction to it. I mean, the hirings, the firings, the tariffs, the tanking of the stock market, the budget battle, his threat of a veto that could have led to a 2-week government shutdown. I've never seen it like this. And I've been monitoring the news and talking about it since Richard Nixon was our president. And I really respect that many people find this to be just too much. And so perhaps you'll want to take today's podcast and play it in segments and digest it in shorter bursts. I can understand that. And even for me, I have to say that some of this just reaches the level of overwhelming. So the Bolton announcement really is the most important and the most dangerous. And we're told that by a CNN reporter that John Bolton promised Trump that if he gave him the National Security Advisor job, he wouldn't start any wars. But that is the whole focus, the life arc of John Bolton. He has wanted war with Iran for over 15 years, and he has been a really hawkish voice on North Korea in the most recent period. So stock market dropped 724 points yesterday, and the virus spread around the world as markets declined by as much as 5%. And the trade wars are just getting started. One of Trump's lawyers, the top guy, John Dowd, helping Trump fight the Mueller investigation, he stepped down because, well, Trump doesn't listen to him. Can't blame him. We'll update you a little bit later on the Bimbo eruptions. Anderson Cooper seems to be getting these women to talk. And let's dig in a little deeper to John Bolton, because it appears to me that after Trump impulsively accepted the invitation to meet with Kim Jong-un and really didn't think it through, he decided that he wanted to go to this meeting surrounded by thugs. You know, he's building a posse because he's an insecure and ignorant guy. And he imagines that Rexon Tillerson would be too feeble, too accommodating. So he plugs in Mike Pompeo, the Koch brothers congressman who served a year as CIA director and kissed up to Trump every way he could. So Trump has yes men and warmongers now in his inner circle. And with the May deadline related to the latest certification of Iranian compliance with the nuclear deal, we can see imminent tensions rising with Iran and with the unfinished plan for a Trump summit with Kim Jong-un, perhaps in May. Well, it's going to be a very difficult spring season here in the United States. So I've been in touch with Gareth Porter. He's the historian and journalist who has written extensively about Iran. He knows quite a bit about John Bolton and his role in trying to gin up war with Iran. And he published a piece on March 22nd at the American Conservative called The Untold Story of John Bolton's Campaign for War with Iran. And I have linked to that article in the show file for today's podcast. I won't enumerate it for you because I have too much other stuff to cover, and I have asked Gareth Porter for an in-depth interview, which I hope to record early next week. But it's very, very fair to say that John Bolton is a dangerous, dangerous individual. And as Trump surrounds himself with these people, I can hear the argument about to surface that, well, this is the best way to prevent war, by creating the most credible threat that war is imminent. And we saw just how effective that logic, such as it's called, was back in 2002, 2003. I can remember Hillary Clinton saying that she voted to give George Bush the authority to invade Iraq because that was the best way to prevent an invasion of Iraq. And in the lead editorial in Friday's New York Times, they correctly note, yes, John Bolton really is that dangerous. And they detail it quite well. And one of the things they note is that Trump previously rejected Bolton for National Security Advisor and Secretary of State, in part because the president doesn't like Bolton's bushy mustache. I mean, that shows how tragicomic this era is here in the United States. And let's just look at a couple of juicy quotes from John Bolton. I mean, this guy, a 2015 op-ed in the New York Times headlined, "To stop Iran's bomb Iran." He wrote that the inconvenient truth is that only military action will accomplish U.S. objectives against the Ayatollah. And recently, from his perch at Fox News and friendly editorial pages like the Wall Street Journal, John Bolton has advocated for a preemptive strike on North Korea. So this shows how unhinged and irrational John Bolton can be. And Trump has brought him into his inner circle. I hope that Bolton keeps his promise not to start a war. But I have no confidence whatsoever in that claim. Conveniently, Cambridge Analytica has been in the news all week, the 50 million Facebook profiles that they got a hold of and used for the Trump campaign. Well, it turns out that John Bolton beat Trump to the to the punch there. He hired Cambridge Analytica to support the activities of the John Bolton Super PAC, which was largely funded by the Mercer family. Rebecca Mercer and her daddy, Robert. Now, if you're not familiar with them, they're the owners of Cambridge Analytica. They brought Steve Bannon into the Trump administration after the Mercers had been supporting Ted Cruz in the primary. And so they dumped $5 million into Bolton's Super PAC between 2014 and 2016. And he spent that to support really conservative and pro-war Republican candidates, like a guy named Tillis. Tillis was in South Carolina, I believe. And so this just shows how deeply immersed John Bolton is in the reactionary establishment of American oligarchs. And it shows that the Mercers, even though their guy Steve Bannon got bounced last August, they have many ways to influence, if not dominate, the Trump presidency. Now, speaking of Cambridge Analytica, a new leak of a 27-page, probably a PowerPoint deck, is a blueprint of how Cambridge Analytica claimed to have won the White House for Trump using Google, Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. And the details are a little bit sketchy here from the article that I'm referring to. But the claim is that intensive survey research, data modeling, and performance optimizing algorithms were used to target 10,000 different ads to different audiences in the months leading up to the election. And these ads were viewed billions of times. Now, I would like to see the content of those ads and the targeting that was used to deliver them, because I believe many of them will have racist messages, anti-immigration messages, and those kinds of wedge issues that Trump used effectively in 2016. So we'll certainly learn more about this. The report here is the document contains very little information about how the campaign used Facebook data, and I'm sure that there will be more forthcoming on that particular front. Now, just to get things warmed up for John Bolton and to grease the way for raising tensions and pounding war drums against Iran, the Trump administration today announced criminal charges against 9 Iranian citizens. They're charged with stealing information from American government agencies, universities, corporations, as part of a huge cyber theft operation to benefit the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The suspects worked in an Iran-based company called place called Mabna Institute as managers, contractors, and hackers for hire. Now, I can't prove that this is a reliable, credible charge. But the timing leads me to believe that this is just a little foreplay just to kind of get the party started. Well, late last night, the Senate approved this $1.3 trillion spending bill. We're starting to learn what's in the package because we know that the House passed it in the afternoon yesterday. The Senate stayed up late to pass it, and it's because they want to get out of town. They're launching into a 2-week spring recess with Easter coming up. And that is the reason why Trump did a kind of head fake. He woke up this morning, got out his phone, and started tweeting about how he thought he might veto this budget package. Let's see, this came out at 5:55 a.m. I'm considering a veto of the omnibus spending bill based on the fact that the 800,000-plus DACA recipients have been totally abandoned by the Democrats, and the border wall is not fully funded. Now, of course, the whole issue about DACA is that he made hostages out of about 800,000 dreamers here in this country. And the Democrats tried and failed to use their limited leverage to get a DACA bill passed. The pressure is off now because a federal court has put on hold the president's order ending Obama's DACA program. So I think that this is such a red herring. I fault the Democrats for not dealing with the DACA issue to date and for lowering its priority. But Trump offered them an extortion package, a limited relief deal for the dreamers in exchange for the full $25 billion he's asking for the Mexico border wall. And so he was just posturing for his Twitter fans, the hardcore who wanted to hear him shut down the government. They wanted to hear him veto this bill. And, of course, with a 2-week recess coming up and many members of Congress having already left town, Trump would face the responsibility for shutting the government down for a full 2 weeks. And, of course, he's heading to Florida, Mar-a-Lago again. So he really didn't have any choice. But he tried to pretend that as a man of action and impetuousness that he was going to veto the bill. And, again, I expect we're going to find a lot of stinkers in this omnibus spending bill. But the initial reporting indicates that Democrats bested Republicans regarding almost everything except defense spending. They caved to the Republicans, never even tried to reduce the increase in defense spending, but they traded it for an increase in domestic spending that blocks Betsy DeVos from cutting spending at the Education Department. In fact, they increased the budget by almost $4 billion there. The effort to cut the Environmental Protection Agency by 30% was basically neutralized, and Congress also blocked a giant reduction in staffing at EPA by wiping out a $60 million fund for buyouts for current employees. Also, they got full funding for the National Endowment for Humanities, National Endowment for the Arts, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, and on and on. Even over at HUD, where Ben Carson is on the hot seat for his dining room set, he was trying to cut the budget by $6 billion, and the budget bill actually increases the funding at HUD by $4.7 billion. So, mixed bag. I'm sure that what will come out in the wash will be very problematic and offensive, but at least at this stage, it appears that the Democrats got the better of Trump on this one. There are two articles about Russiagate that I've linked to in today's podcast show file that got my attention and deserve your close scrutiny. First, the claim from the Daily Beast. Headline, lone DNC hacker Guccifer 2.0 slipped up and revealed he was a Russian intelligence officer. And when you read the story carefully, it is just speculation. They claim a forensic determination has substantial implications and that they've identified that Guccifer 2.0 was in fact an officer of Russia's Military Intelligence Directorate, the GRU. Now, they provide absolutely no evidence, just saying that they have learned that the special counsel is now probing Guccifer. But the flimsy rationale or argument that they offer for the proof that Guccifer is a GRU officer is that on one occasion, Guccifer failed to activate the virtual private network client. They tell us that the forensics show that whoever Guccifer is was entering the Internet anonymously through a server in France, and his virtual private network reportedly failed just one time, and as a result, he left a real Moscow-based IP address in the server logs of an American social media company. But hold on a minute, this is just bullshit for gullible people, because we know that the hacking tools that were stolen from the NSA allow somebody to hack in and leave footprints, fingerprints, or breadcrumbs that make it appear that they were somebody else. And that angle is not explored in any way in this article at the Daily Beast. So I dismiss it as just a fresh pile of cow dung. The other one that is questionable today comes from the Washington Post, and this story is based on emails that the reporters admit that they have not seen. Somebody has described these emails to them over the telephone. And we're told to trust this third-hand hearsay information. The article says, but emails described to the Washington Post show that George Papadopoulos had more extensive contact with key Trump campaign and presidential transition officials than has been publicly acknowledged. But these don't directly relate to Russia. It's about his contacts with Greece. It's about some interviews that he did where he talked about Russia. But this is just more. It's bad reporting, and it is not journalism. I mentioned that the Dow and worldwide markets crashed as a result of Trump's announcement of the new sanctions and tariffs that we described yesterday. China has announced an initial modest response, saying it will impose tariffs on about $3 billion of American-produced fruit, pork, wine, steel pipes, and more than 100 other products. But expect more announcements from Beijing. And this is a trade war that will escalate, and it's going to harm Americans and American interests. It's also alienating many of our allies. Then we go to the Bimbo eruptions. That was the phrase used in Little Rock to describe the women who came forward and accused Bill Clinton of sexual antics. Well, we now have on the record Karen McDougal. She's the one who sold her story to the National Enquirer, which then buried it. And she gave an interview last night on CNN to Anderson Cooper. I guess these former mistresses like to talk to the gay guy. Cooper is also expected to host the interview with Stormy Daniels that has been scheduled for all of the last 3 Sundays, but we're told should be aired this Sunday night on 60 Minutes. And McDougal talks about their first encounter at the Beverly Hilton, when they had sex, and then as she was going to leave, he tried to pay her, and she was upset by that. She said, "That's not me. I'm not that kind of girl." But then she went back for more. She had a 10-month serious relationship. She said that he told her he loved her and that she loved him so much she considered marrying him. I mean, this is wow. It's soap opera quality stuff. Anyway, Will this have an impact beyond infuriating Melania? And perhaps she'll follow Vanessa, Don Jr.'s wife, into the divorce court. I mean, there's even a case where at the Playboy Mansion, McDougal posed for a picture with Trump, Melania, and Ivanka. Oh, and yeah, this is going to get Trevor Noah going. He's the one who repeatedly said that Donald Trump wants to bang his daughter, Ivanka. Yes, the mistress said that Trump had compared her favorably to Ivanka. He said I was beautiful like her, and you're a smart girl. Every day I pause for a second to thank the people who support my work at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. Today, let's thank Joey Perillo, Wendy Gebauer, Abby McMillan, and Paul Tomaselli. They're all stalwart and staunch supporters of my work, and for whatever reason, I've had another couple of cancellations of people who've been subscribing for a long time. So this is your opportunity to step up. I need 10 new subscribers in the next 10 days. All you got to do is visit peterbcollins.com, find the menu tab, pull it down, click on Become a Subscriber. You land on the sign-up page, and you can choose $5, $10, $20 a month or our $50 annual subscription. I truly do need more support, so don't delay. All right? Thank you. And I am very pleased that today, after about 2 weeks of trying, I caught up with reporter Patrick Martin. He wrote the 3-part series that we highlighted when it was published in the first week of March, called The CIA Democrats, and it was published at the World Socialist website. And Patrick Martin details the exhaustive study he did of the Democrats who have been recruited and who are running for Congress in various races across the country this year. And the astounding takeaway is that the largest subcategory of these Democratic candidates is not people who are currently elected at the state and local level. It is national security operatives and former soldiers. And this is a troubling shift of the Democratic Party. I hope you'll listen to the interview. I'm linking in that show file to the 3-part series. I invite you to read it. And here's a strong excerpt from my conversation with reporter Patrick Martin.
Because I'd started out with as I said, with a note in the Washington Post that named 1 or 2 people who were running. But it soon became clear that this was not an incidental or minor feature of the 2018 campaign, but this was a major change. There's no precedent for this, particularly in the Democratic Party, which historically the serving military has tended to be more Republican, at least in the last 30 or 40 years. The Democratic Party has made a political decision to shift from being a party for the Pentagon and CIA to being a party of the Pentagon and CIA.
My thanks to Patrick Martin for his in-depth study of the Democratic challenger class of 2018. He also weighed in with comments about censorship on the Internet and how the World Socialist website has seen its referral traffic from Google search drop remarkably over the past year. One of the other things that we discussed during the interview is that the passage of the bill called SESTA, the Stop Enabling Sex Trafficking Act, it passed through the Congress on Wednesday. Only 2 members of the Senate, as I recall, voted against this crap. And the biggest issue is, I certainly am opposed to sex trafficking. But this law doesn't differentiate between sexual websites where sex workers advertise, like Backpage, and Craigslist, where average people, whether they are single or not, try to connect with other people for relationships. Not all of them are sexual in their fundamental orientation, but some are. And Trump hasn't even signed this into law yet. But yesterday, Craigslist took down its entire personal ads section, saying that the law opens it up to criminal and civil liability when third parties, that's the users, misuse online personals unlawfully, and that it can't take such a risk without jeopardizing all our other services. Now, this is one aspect of it, but consider that this law doesn't make a distinction between third-party content of a sexual nature and, say, third-party content of a political nature. And this leaves website operators and social media platforms like Facebook with legal advice that says, you better not post a Peter B. Collins podcast. We can't prove that he's credible. And don't put up something from the World Socialist website. Use a safe outlet like the Washington Post or the Daily Beast with their evidence-free speculative reporting. This is a very, very dangerous law. I'm sure Trump will sign it, but the people who voted for it owe us an explanation and an apology. Tomorrow's the big day where in Washington, D.C., we expect, I think, hundreds of thousands, if not over 1 million people to march. Here in San Francisco, the projections are that at least 100,000 people will attend the march that was launched by the students at the high school, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, after the Valentine's Day shooting that killed 17 of their classmates. And while up to this point, we only know that the students have been saying, do something. Well, at The Guardian, they gave the student newspaper staff from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, the people who work for the Eagle Eye, they gave those young writers the opportunity to offer a manifesto. And let me tick it off for you. They want to ban semi-automatic weapons that fire high-velocity rounds, ban accessories that simulate automatic weapons, establish a database of gun sales and universal background checks, change privacy laws to allow mental health care providers to communicate with law enforcement, and that's a very sticky issue, close gun show and secondhand sales loopholes, allow the CDC to make recommendations for gun reform. That was actually enabled by a clause in the budget bill that the president signed today. Raise the firearm purchase age to 21, and dedicate more funds to mental health research and professionals. The final issue is increase funding for school security, and they don't explicitly say to arm teachers, but they want more armed police officers or, so-called resource officers on campus. And, I recognize that in high crime areas, in inner city areas where we have high concentration of gang activity, that we already have cops on high school campuses, I just don't think it's a rational response to this complex issue. Glenn Greenwald is back at covering the trial of Omar Mateen's widow. Mateen, the guy who shot up the Pulse nightclub in Orlando. And I'll link to the article. Again, Greenwald has revised what we thought were the facts of the Pulse nightclub shooting. And the most notable part is that Omar Mateen allegedly never cased the joint. He actually looked it up on his phone minutes before he went there and began shooting. And so the prosecution of his widow, who is described as a low IQ and highly suggestible individual, she was subjected to a 17-hour interrogation by the FBI. And at one point, they took away the young son that she had with Omar Mateen and left her wondering that, that might be a permanent situation. So they forced her to admit to things that she had not initially agreed with. And now the shit has hit the fan because in federal court, the judge is brushing back the FBI for lying to them. U.S. District Judge Paul Byron is presiding over this case, and yesterday he grilled the FBI special agent who had submitted testimony, including this forced confession from her name is Noor, and the problem is that Fenneman testified that the FBI had learned within days of Noor Salman signing the statement that her claim was false. Using geolocation data from cell phone records and documentary evidence of the couple's whereabouts, the FBI had already concluded long before the widow was arrested that it was impossible that she went to Pulse with Mateen on the night of the shootings. This is just another case of the FBI lying. It is a rogue agency. And none of the political hijinks that we have seen in the last 18 months will do anything to rein in the rogue agency. There are a couple of reads that I don't have time for, but I want to recommend to you. They're linked in the show file. First, from Jonathan Ophir. He's the Israeli expat and symphony musician who lives in Scandinavia, and he wrote a great piece offering some excellent context about this week's 8-month jail sentence for the 17-year-old Palestinian girl Ahed Tamimi, and a similar sentence for her mother, who videotaped the daughter as she slapped an Israeli soldier. And there's also a great long read available at Rolling Stone. Matt Taibbi wrote a piece called The Legacy of the Iraq War, and nobody comes out unscathed, and that is appropriate. I hope you'll read it and recognize the wisdom of what he is offering. And finally today, you've heard about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It's all our plastic bags and the trash and waste that is not biodegradable. Well, there's been a new study, and it shows that the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is nearly 4 times the size of the state of California. It weighs as much as 500 jumbo jets. It reflects 243 pieces of trash for each person on the planet. And 90% of seabirds have plastic in their guts. Well, that's the real legacy that humans have left behind on this planet. Thanks for listening to my daily news and comment podcast. You're free to share it far and wide. We post it on YouTube, and if you visit there, click on the subscribe button. It's free.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.